Welcome, all pregnant families, midwives or birth workers. This is Tracy Anderson Askew, your host for the Transform Your Birth podcast, changing your mind about birth one story at a time. Each week, we will be exploring a birth story through the lens of what birth can teach us. I'll be digging deep into each story so you can learn what it is that can change the way a birth unfolds. We can't control birth, but we can influence it. So listen in to find out how. Enjoy. Mel conceived her baby using IVF, which was a long journey. When she was pregnant, she started to realise she needed to get this baby out and was open to anything. After hearing some stories, she realised she needed to prepare. When she did the Transform Your Birth course, she could see how her and her partner could get through using tools and breathing and getting on the same page. This changed her mindset dramatically as she could see the value of the birth process. What resulted was a long labour, a caesarean, and a feeling of excitement to meet her baby. She said it would have been very easy to get scared, but through preparation, she experienced the changes easily and with a sense of agency. Lots to be learned through Mel's story.
Before we begin, a note from our sponsor. This episode has been brought to you by Transform Parenting, an organisation that provides courses, coaching and community from pregnancy through to the first 7 years of a child's life. Most of the stories you will hear through this podcast are graduates of the Transform Your Birth workshop held in Canberra. Our Transform Your Birth Today course is now available to anyone, anywhere, at any time, and includes all the wonderful wisdom of this course and live weekly catch-ups when you need it with our host, Tracy. For a little taste, please accept our pregnancy gift offer, which contains free the first few lessons and some essential wisdom for pregnancy. The link can be found in these show notes or visit transformyourbirth.com.au. And now for the episode.
Hello, everyone. Welcome again to the Transform Your Birth podcast. And with me today is the lovely Mel. And Mel went on a bit of a roller coaster, so I'm really looking forward to hearing her story. And it's nice to get stories where things can deviate off the normal path, because sometimes we need help in birth and we need to know how to manage that as well, because really at the end of the day, we're walking into the mystery. So welcome, Mel. Thank you for sharing your story.
That's all right. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's great to have you. So when you were pregnant, Mel, how were you feeling about the prospect of giving birth? And just give us a bit of an idea as to how you prepared.
Yeah, look, it took us a number of years to actually fall pregnant.
Wow.
So once we sort of got to the pregnancy stage, the whole giving birth side, it didn't really cross my mind, funnily enough. I just kind of rolled with pregnancy. And it wasn't until different friends started sharing their stories that I started going, oh, I hadn't really considered the whole giving birth side or the labor side of this. We were just so excited to become pregnant that we just kind of moved through that. And I know in the course I did with you, it's so true. You know, everyone tells you the horror stories. And I know we were out for a Christmas dinner with friends and people started saying things, and I was just grabbing my husband's leg under the table going, oh my God, what have we got ourselves into? We wanted to get pregnant. We wanted the baby, didn't really consider the whole birthing of child. And so that was where we then ended up doing your course. And that really changed everything for me, because I hadn't considered what birth would actually look like and what labor would actually be like at all. It hadn't really registered as something that we were going to have to go through, funnily enough.
So you came to it, and this is, other people's stories can be very impactful on a labouring woman and come in, like I often say, what people say to you can find its way into your labour room.
Yeah.
And how we talk about birth is really, really important, because it's not helpful to share the difficult parts that people go through when they give birth. What's more helpful to a pregnant woman is what women discover that help them through the process. That's way more helpful than, sharing a story that, doesn't leave people feeling very confident. So when you did the course, Mel, what was it about what you learned that started to shift your mindset, and how did you change?
I think the biggest thing I think was talking about it very openly.
Yeah.
And it wasn't a case of what to be afraid of. It felt more like what to look forward to
Ah,
within labour.
yeah.
I think it really helped my partner or my husband and I be on the same page as to what's coming and what this is going to look like.
Yeah.
A very good friend of mine had also done your course beforehand. And so when she had her baby, we went to see them and she just spoke about it so positively. And she said, yeah, it was tough. You're laboring, you're giving birth, but it was such a positive conversation. And I walked away from that going, this is the first time I've actually had this conversation with a friend. So that really changed everything for me. But I think within the course was talking about it so openly and actually talking about, having an idea of what it could look like and what we can actually do to counteract what's going to come, or when this happens, you can do this. These are all of the tools that you can start to use.
Yeah.
And the biggest thing, and I remember at the time, my internal dialogue going, oh, for God's sake, was, you said it time and time again, and I laugh now, but it was, you want to birth with love and not fear.
Yeah. Yeah.
And my entire internal dialogue was going, okay, yeah, here we go.
Fluffy love. What the hell does that mean?
Yeah, I'm going, what do you mean birth with love? For God's sake, of course, I'm going to be full of fear. But at no point in time was I actually scared in labour. There were times where I was really uncomfortable, and there were times where I was thinking I'd like to be anywhere else but here. But I wasn't scared, and I wasn't fearful of what was happening. And there was always that underlying, this is all going towards something good. It's all worth it. It's all worth it. And I think if I hadn't done the course, I would have been absolutely scared out of my mind.
So let me just dive into that a little bit more deeply. The idea of birthing with love, not fear, from the outset can sound a bit flaky. Like, what do you mean birth with love? But what Mel's describing there is a real mindset shift. And it comes down to understanding that fear leads to more tension in the body. It can elicit the stress response because you're in survival. And when you get stressed, you release adrenaline, which works against the feel-good hormone of oxytocin. When you get stressed, the blood flow gets rediverted from your core into your arms and legs, because that's telling you need to run from some danger or fight or take it on. So that fight-flight response. And that as an antidote to going into fear, making labour harder and more powerful, more painful, is the antidote of love. And in order to love your labour, you need to start to understand and appreciate the benefits of what it is that you're doing. When you have a greater understanding of how Mother Nature is setting you up to be ready to meet this baby, and not only be ready to fall in love, but to want to protect the baby, to want to feed the baby, to want to get up 2 or 3 times a night, or even more sometimes, then having a great sense of the benefit and the power of what it is that you're doing shifts mindset and shifts the experience of birth. So it actually isn't flaky, and it's not flaky because it boils down to physiology. If you're in a state of loving, then you're open. If you're in a state of fear, then you're in emergency survival, shutting it down, making it harder, making it more painful. Yeah, because when you take the blood away from the uterus into the arms and legs, a muscle with not enough blood flow becomes very painful. It becomes ischemic, it cramps up, making labour more painful. So just understanding that alone can really shift people's mindset. And it sounds like it did to you as well, Mel. That's really funny.
Yeah, massively. Yeah, massively.
Yeah. So tell us how it unfolded for you.
I had been sort of having cramps in the week leading up.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd gone in and seen my obstetrician as sort of a last check-in. And she was fantastic throughout the whole process. but she had said, oh, so we'll induce you on your due date because it's an IVF baby.
Right.
And I remember having done the course with you, we had discussed as a little concern the push to induce and all of that.
Mm.
And I know, when we did the course and we spoke about when your body's ready, it will like give your body time to do what it needs to do without all of this extra interference. And so I'd had a chat with hubby and I said, I just want to go as long as we can. If it becomes a concern for Bub and we need to induce, then we can do it. But I don't just want to do it for the sake. So we had a plan of, your due date's on the Thursday. We'll do a stretch and sweep on the Friday. Then we'll give you a couple of days to see what happens. And then we'll have a cutoff day that if we need to induce, we will. So I said, okay, great. Off I go. And sure enough, on the Wednesday night, got into bed with hubby. Half an hour later, waters broke. And so that I think was about 10 o'clock at night.
Mm-hmm.
Called the hospital and let them know what was happening. And my husband had them on speakerphone and the midwife's there going, yeah, tomorrow's a pretty busy day for us. If there's no...
Do you mind keeping your legs together?
I'm there going, what? She said, just stay at home and get comfortable for as long as you can. Okay, great. So we get off the phone and we stayed at home until about 5 a.m. that morning. We did have a last minute call at about 2 a.m. to the hospital because Bub had actually, he moved quite significantly. I ended up in a bit of pain. And we think at that time he actually might have flipped or became posterior because all of a sudden my labor pains changed quite dramatically from what they were.
Yeah.
Called the hospital and they said, look, stay at home if you can, jump in the bath, try and relax. So we were at home for several hours, moving up and down the house. There was music on, dimly lit, just sort of going through the motions of it. And it got to about 5 a.m. And I just said, no, I'm ready to not be here. I need a new space. So off we went to the hospital, got there at about 5:30 in the morning, straight into the room. And at that point in time, we realized, and you're going to have to forgive me, Tracy, I don't know what it's called. The discharge I had changed. So he had done a poo.
Yeah.
Meconium. There we go. Thank you. So all of a sudden that became a concerning factor for the hospital. So we're plugged up with different things to monitor. We're in the labour room. And we just kind of rolled through everything that, I don't know, that kind of went by. And it was funny. It wasn't until after having Harry that I started to piece things together in my mind, because we got in there and they said, so do you want an epidural? Do you want gas? What would you like? And in my head, I was thinking, I did a birth preference form. Why are you asking me these questions?
Yeah.
So that's probably one tip I would give to anyone pregnant, is if you're going in with a preference for certain things, just make sure they've actually got the form in your folder that they refer to, because my form wasn't there, which was fine.
I'll just pick up on that point. It is a great tip. Your birth preferences or your birth mapping is a really good way to go. In fact, there's a website called birthmap.life. Catherine Bell, we've had her on the podcast. She's talked about these issues of helping people to think through their preferences and the way that they want things handled under certain conditions. So you map certain options. But one of the most important parts of those documents is that they become a communication tool for your carers to get to know who you are and what's important to you. And Mel's picked up on a point where they've offered her pain relief. Now, just the act of offering pain relief can act as a confidence killer to the mother in labour who's highly vulnerable to the suggestions of the people around her. She can then translate that into her own system. I must need it whether she actually needs it or not. Now, the midwife offering that can be well-intentioned, but just the act of offering it when you've got other tools in your toolkit, and yes, they're in your toolkit too, but we keep them in the bottom of the bag because they do come at a cost. And sometimes that cost is worth paying, and that's fine. There's no judgment here around using them, but it is important to make informed decisions and know fully what it is that you're signing up for. So a midwife offering that can actually cause the mother to doubt her ability to be able to manage what it is that she's managing. And that's why a really good thing to put on your birth preferences is, please don't offer me pain relief. We'll ask for it if we need it. So it sounds like they didn't read that part of the script.
No, I don't know where that sheet ended up, because we had originally gone in and, before the course we did, I was very indifferent, but
Yeah.
I was indifferent because I didn't have the knowledge to make an informed decision before the course.
Yeah.
People would say, oh God, take whatever you can get. And then other people would say, oh, it wasn't that bad. And I didn't know the outcome. I didn't know what the effect would be for me, for Bub, what it would look like. So I think that was one thing in the course, knowing, well, these are your options if you need that sort of support. This is what the effects could be. And so we had put on the form, I'll ask for it if I want it. Take out a clock. Yes, I'd like a TENS machine. Yes, I want access to a bath/shower.
Yeah.
And so when we were in there and they had sort of suggested anything, and I just said, no, I'll just go as long as I can and just see what happens. And so that had worked quite well. I think it got to about 7 or 8 a.m. And I just was it just became really uncomfortable. And I had just my inner dialogue was, it's just a wave. It's coming. It's just a wave. It's going to come and it's going to go. And I remember at one stage they had said, look, let's try and get you in the bath. And I said, I can't sit down because Bub had turned. Okay, let's just get you in the shower. And so I thought I was in there for 5 minutes. Turns out we'd been in there for about 2 hours. I had no concept of time,
Yeah.
It's amazing, Tracy, because you are 100% there, but mentally you're so there, but you're not there.
Yeah.
It's like, it was a very it's like an out-of-body experience.
Yeah.
You're completely there, but you're so far from there that there's all this movement and all of these things happening around you. And friends kept saying, oh, trust me, when you're in labour, you won't care what you look like, what's this, what's that. And I kept thinking, oh my God, it's going to be gross. There's going to be bodily fluids. Oh, I don't want to do this. And it's true. You go with it.
And
because
I think, you are in a different part of your brain.
Yeah, you really are.
And that timelessness piece, let me just pick up on that, because one of the things that Mother Nature supports us with, and it's in endorphins, which is it gives you a sense of timelessness. So what Mel's describing is right. You can be in labour for hours and you have no idea. Now, the way to get in the way of that is to tell women how long they've been in labour for, to mention breakfast, lunch or dinner, or to have the woman staring at the clock.
Yeah.
I had a woman who came to me for her second birth, and when I talked about time, she told me that her first birth, she was looking at the clock. She was watching every second of every minute of every hour. And she realised in hindsight how that messed with her mind.
Yeah.
If we allow those hormones to do their job and just disconnect and just be in the here and the now, then that timelessness actually works in our favour. So it's interesting to hear you say that.
Yeah. So I thought that was really interesting. And I know we kept talking when we did the breathing exercises in the class. And you'd said, just do the practice. And we left. And I said to Hayden, oh God, we're just not these kind of people. Like, I'm not doubting Tracy, but I just can't see us. And funnily enough, while we're in labour, he goes, here, look, I'll put one of these on. Press play.
Yeah.
I'm not even aware of what's going on. But it's funny. All I could focus on was my breathing.
Yeah.
And it
Nice.
really, when those contractions came, it was just that breathing through. And, I just kept telling myself, keep your mouth closed, breathe through your nose, just breathe through your nose, just breathe through it. And it really, that also helped then take me somewhere else. And Hayden had spoken about it since with friends, and they've said, partners have said, oh God, how crazy is it when they're in labour and this. And Hayden said, I could hear women in other rooms crying out or calling out or what have you. And he said, I've never seen Mel so quiet before. Like, she was just
In the zone.
somewhere else.
Mm.
And so again, I think that because I had that mindset and I had those tools, I wasn't jumping into being terrified about what was happening. It was very much, let's just get through one thing at a time. Yeah. And so that sort of got me through to about, I think, 7, 8 a.m. And at which point my obstetrician happened to come on shift, and she'd said to me at the very beginning, if you have your baby on the due date, it'll be me delivering it, because I'm in the hospital on Thursday. And funnily enough, Harry actually did arrive on his due date.
Wow.
And she walked in and she said, a happy face, I know. And I just looked at her and she went, oh, okay, I'll be back in a second.
She brought a bit too much jolliness into the
A
room
little
by
too
the
much
sound of it.
jolliness into the room. And she went out, got all of the information, and she came back in. And we'd had really good conversations around me not wanting pain medication for as long as possible, not really wanting an epidural, all of those sorts of things. And she came in and look, I guess you could look at it as a twofold scenario. She just said to me, look, I know you don't want an epidural. I'm going to say it's something maybe just to consider.
Mm-hmm.
And which in hindsight now sounds hilarious, because how can I consider something when I'm in the middle of it?
Yeah.
But she had just said, you've not slept since Tuesday night. This could continue for hours. If you want it, have it. You don't have to have it now, but just if you want it, you can have it. And I remember looking at my husband, Hayden, and he just said, you know what? You do what you need to do to get through.
Mm.
And that was, for me, in that moment, the perfect thing to say.
Yep.
Because I didn't feel like I was being pushed into having it. I didn't feel like it was a case of you can't do it without it. But if you have it, that's all right as well. And so I just said, yeah, let's just do it. And at that stage, oh my God, it had been 10, 12 hours. We hadn't eaten since dinner the night before. Neither of us had slept from labor. And I was at the point where I couldn't sit, I couldn't lie down, I couldn't bend over. So it was really getting to the point, physically, my body was I was exhausted, and I was getting to the point where I felt I was going, I can't, I've reached my limit of what I can do. And so I ended up.
Had your baby turned? Were you aware of the positioning of your baby?
Yeah, so he had turned posterior, and they think that must have happened while we were at home.
Yeah.
No one had ever mentioned him being posterior my whole pregnancy. I'd had no back pain, no nothing the whole pregnancy. But there was a really sharp, sudden movement at home. It shocked me, and it actually gave Hayden quite a fright, because he saw the whole baby lift and then drop.
Yeah.
And so when we called the hospital, they went, oh, okay, keep an eye on that as well. And so when they were looking around at him and the positioning, that was when they said, we actually think he's turned posterior. So his spine's on your spine, and that's why it's far more, it's a much sharper pain in your lower back than what you may otherwise experience.
Yeah.
And I think in the end, that's actually what got me, was the lower back.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what happens when a baby's posterior is their spine on spine and their little heads and, body is rubbing up against the mother's spine.
Yeah.
Now, babies can be born posterior, but it tends to be a lot harder and longer labour.
Yeah.
And these are the sort of mysterious forces that you can't always control in the birth process. And sometimes you can influence it. You can sort of try and encourage them to move, but at the end of the day, they're going to do what they do. So you had the epidural, and then what happened after
So
that?
ended up with the epidural. Might have been at about 11 a.m. now, I think. And then we were just hooked up for monitoring after that. Hayden got some sleep. I had a bit of sleep on and off, something to eat, and just sort of mentally, I think, regroup with what was happening.
Yeah.
And a few hours went by, and all of a sudden midwives were starting to trickle in a little more often, and they would come up and look at the report that was coming up. And they started mentioning that Harry's heartbeat was increasing. And I think it had been about 3 hours. And they said, do you mind if we check how dilated you are? And I thought, yeah, that's fine now because I'm not. You tell me, I'm okay. I've had time to regroup and work through this. And so they said, yeah, you are dilating, so that's good. But his heart rate was increasing. So they were starting to become quite concerned about that because of you used the word before,
Meconium.
meconium. So that was becoming a concern for them.
So let me just clarify what Mel's talking about there. When babies are in utero, typically they don't poo, but sometimes they can. And they can poo even before you go into labour, and it just be sitting in the waters. But as going through the birth process, as the baby's getting compressed and squeezed and things like that, a meconium release can get in the way of baby being able to breathe. So if they ingest it, it's like a thick tar-like substance. So when babies are born, their first poos are very black and sticky and like tar. And if they ingest it in the birth process, it can actually affect their lungs and their ability to breathe when they're born. And so your carers, and meconium in the waters, it can be a big issue or it can be nothing. But your carers always have to err on the side of caution. So if there is a meconium release, one, it can be a sign that the baby's not happy, and two, they worry about the baby ingesting it and having breathing issues. So they do keep an eye on it from then on, usually.
So they were starting to get quite concerned about that. Heart rate just continued to climb.
Yeah.
And it got to about 3:30, and the obstetrician came back in, and she started talking about assisted birth, and she started talking about, the epidural starting to wear off. We may need to look at an assisted birth potentially. So they checked, you're fully dilated, but there's no movement happening.
Yeah.
So they started talking about if we need forceps, if we need a vacuum. And I just was lying there going, oh my goodness, like what? This is really going now from 0 to 100. Because originally I was saying, I don't want that either. Like I don't want to be having to do that. If we need to do it, that's a different conversation, but I don't really feel like using these sorts of tools just because. And so she checked, yep, you're fully dilated. I can actually feel the top of Bub's head. You're not feeling any contractions though. And I said no. And she went, all right. She's then actually left the room, come back in, and all of a sudden we've got a surgeon assistant there, and there's a lot of people starting to file into the room. And they just said, look, we've called the next sort of specialist obstetrician over me. What we're going to do, or what we're suggesting, is that we prep you for the theatre room. We're going to try and get you to do a couple of pushes when you're having a contraction. And if that doesn't work, we're actually going to do a caesarean. birth by caesarean.
Yeah.
You know, how do you feel about that? And I just, at that point, Tracy, I just said, I don't care. Just get this baby out. I don't, if it's a caesarean, it's a caesarean. I don't care. I just want bub out and I want bub safe. You tell me what we need to do and we'll do it. That's fine. So anyway, sign on the dotted line and off we go into theatre. It's kind of funny though, because they have to top you up with epidural or an anaesthetic, whatever it is that they use, so that you don't feel anything for the caesarean. Yet they're then telling you we're going to tell you when to push. I'm like, I can't feel anything. Like there's nothing, nothing's working at the moment. So yeah, in we went to surgery. I've never seen so many people I've never been in an operating room before, but there was 30 odd people. Everyone was lovely. They're all chatting away. We've got music on in the background. It was fabulous.
Like a party.
That was great. I said, can we put music on? Yeah, who do you want? Anyway, so music's on. We're in the room. And at that point, they had pre-warned us that Harry may not come out crying, because if he's swallowed the meconium stuff, that could affect his lungs.
Breathing.
He may not come out crying. Don't panic. Just, we'll work through it step by step. And we didn't know what we were having. So it was a really nice surprise. They pulled him out, dropped the blue curtain, pulled him out, and everyone's crying. We're crying. Staff are all crying. It was great. And they've got him on the little table and he was crying, which was quite a relief.
Yeah.
But they had him on the little table and they had to do a little bit of work on him for about half an hour, 45 minutes. So I said to Hayden, just stay next to him. And they were really great. Like, they moved the little bed table over so that I could actually see him, because I didn't get to do skin on skin straight away, which was something I did want. But at that point in time, they had to empty out his stomach and his lungs, because there was about 15 mil that he'd swallowed. So at that point, the specialist obstetrician just said this was why I said, let's just get you straight in for the caesarean now, because even by the time that epidural wears off, you could be labouring now for another God knows how many hours. It's extra stress on bub. It's time to just get bub out now. So I was really glad that someone came in and just made that call that this is what we're going to do, and we're going to do it now.
Yeah. So Mel, can I ask you the question then? Going through, a labour and having to roll with all those different changes, what was it about your mindset or the way that you were thinking about that enabled you to be able to adapt, going from plan A to plan B and almost plan C, really?
Yeah, we went through everything, didn't we? Look, I don't know. I think I very much in my head just thought this labour to an extent is out of my hands. Whatever's going to happen is going to happen. There's only so much I can control, and what I can control is me and my mindset.
Right.
And that's it.
Yeah.
If we go in and it's quick and it's easy breezy, great. If we go in and we have to go from plan A, B, C, D, then that's just what we'll do, and we'll just face each of those decisions at that point in time.
Yeah.
I think in hindsight, for me, having that epidural with what then followed actually allowed me to make clear, conscious decisions after that epidural, whereas I think if I hadn't have had it, continued to go the way we were going, and then all of a sudden something was changing, I don't know if I would have been as calm and collected.
Yeah. That's an interesting insight right there.
Yeah. And it was because I was able to think clearly, and I was out of that situation, and it was the decisions I was making, I was
and
making
I think
them.
that's sorry to interject there, but I think that's an important thing when women feel like they've been a part of the decision-making process, that it hasn't been thrust upon them, that women don't feel like things have been done to them and they haven't been a part of that, then it's much harder to accept. So your ability to roll with what was there was partly because your doctor obviously phrased it in a way that enabled you to be very clear on what path you wanted to take moving
Yeah.
forward.
Yeah. And I think because we'd had those conversations, each of the checkups, she'd just say, do you have any questions? And I thought, oh my God, I've got 1,000 questions, but I'm not going to ask them all today. We'd had enough conversations going into it that she had an idea of what I would want and how I'd like certain things. And I'd said to her the whole time, if there's things that need to happen because they need to happen, then let's just do it. And I think that also then helped on the day to be able to roll with it as much as we could, and just go, this is our journey, this is what it's going to look like. And
so your relationship with your carer is another key thing that changes birth a lot, is having a relationship with people that's based on conversations, where you've been able to express what's important to you, and a level of trust and synergy between the two of you goes a long way when you need to adapt or change tact through the actual birth process. What we know, what the evidence shows us very clearly, is relationship matters in birth.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think too, Tracy, we were so blessed with the staff that we had within that hospital.
Good.
We had 3 or 4 different midwives throughout the shift, and they were all fabulous. We had one that came in who we spent quite a bit of time with within the start of labour. And she came in and was quite sort of, we're going to have a baby, and sort of, like airy-fairy. And I just looked at her and I went, oh my God, I can't deal with this. And she must have picked up on the tack, because then when she came back in, she was quite assertive and, let's try this, let's try that. And I was like, great, we'll keep you. You're fantastic. And she was really good. She just would come in and check in.
Sounds like she could read the room, Mel.
She read the room. She was great. And, we had another student nurse come in who was actually an ED nurse, and she was doing study to become a midwife. And she came in to ask if she could be a part of, the room. I said, yeah, absolutely, not a problem. But we just kept saying the whole time, the staff were amazing. We just felt so cared for. And, they were checking in with Hayden as well. Do you need anything? What can we get you? And that did make a big difference. You felt, you felt like you were at home really with them. So we were very lucky with that as well.
So tell us, when were you able to get your little man on your chest? And tell us about that moment of meeting.
Oh God, we just cried. It's just this, everyone just said, oh, it's instant love. And you go, oh yeah, okay. But it's just the most powerful feeling. And, they lifted him up and they dropped the curtain. I'm crying, Hayden's crying, the midwives are crying. And so once they actually got him onto me, it took about 45 minutes. They'd actually completely re-stitched me up in the time that they were caring for Bub.
Yeah.
And so I could see him, but I hadn't been able to touch him. And so they got me onto the bed and they brought him over. And it just instantly, I don't even know. It just was the most magical moment. And he just sort of snuggled in, and it was just gorgeous. So it was, it just warms every part of you, and they wheeled us off into recovery, and we're there, and Hayden's feeding me crackers because I haven't eaten in hours. And Bub's there, and it was just the best feeling ever. Yeah. Beautiful. Instant love, instant addiction. It just,
It's Mother Nature's intention, and bonding is a very unique experience. It can happen differently. It can be instant or it can be a slow burn, but don't ever underestimate Mother Nature's intention, because the desire to bond and connect is so strongly wired. It's what keeps our species alive. It's very fundamental to having a new baby. So it's different for everyone, but it's lovely to hear people's descriptions of how that is. So Mel ended up feeling a little bit, from conceiving to, okay, how are we going to get this baby out, to hearing people's stories, to doing some preparation and starting to get to your head around, both you and your partner's head around how it can work, to having a labour and recognising that a couple of little things from left field came out, the meconium release when your waters broke, and seeing a bit of meconium, as well as baby changing position and moving into posterior, meant that it brought in a little bit of complexity. And then you had the epidural, and then it appeared like it was going to be a better way to get baby out of the sunroof, the top of the belly, different doorway into the world, but just as valid.
Yeah.
And meeting and having him worked on for a little while, and then meeting him, shows you that, there are things that we can control and things we can't control. And you can't really control for everything in the birth process, because it is a bit of a mystery. But you can influence it. And one of the biggest things that you can do to influence it is adopt a really good mindset, which I think is what your story shows us really clearly, Mel, that you were able to adapt and roll with the birth process by having an open mindset, but also understanding, using things like breathing, having a partner who knows what they're doing, having caregivers who are kind and respectful. All of that can turn what could have been a very difficult experience into something that was just the path that you had to travel to get your baby here.
Yeah. And it's funny because we, I think after 2 days after having Bub, we were like, let's do it again.
I want to do that again.
Yeah.
That's those hormones.
Yeah. Oh, God.
Yeah.
Interesting.
So what would you, well, 2 questions. What have you learnt about yourself, and what would you share with a pregnant woman?
Learn about myself. I think, while I didn't have your typical birth, the labour, it was a long labour. It was about 18 hours. I think I'm a lot stronger than what I thought I was.
Yeah.
It's not until you're in that position that you really work out very quickly who you are, and that you can do it. Learned that I've always considered that I've been adaptable, but I think we adapted to things very quickly and very much on the fly. And I think really that's kind of how we roll with life. So that's quite a normal thing for us in our lives.
Yeah.
Advice to a pregnant woman around pregnancy or birth?
Whatever you feel compelled to share.
Look, I think my advice to any pregnant woman is to just enjoy it. It's such a special time. It really is. And I miss being pregnant now. I love having Harry here, but I do miss being pregnant and carrying that. And it's something that I'm looking forward to doing again in the future, not the near future, but in the future. And I think, advice for going into birth is just being open-minded. Be really open-minded about the experience, and to get yourself into a course where you are prepared for what could come and what is going to come. And I think that's the biggest thing, in all honesty, Tracy. I think if we hadn't done that course, I would have had a very different experience. I think I would have been really scared. And I don't think I'd be looking back on it as fondly as we do now. Yeah.
Thank you for that, Mel. I think the difference is when you're well prepared, pardon me, you have a sense of agency, which is the capacity to respond with whatever comes your way. And you're right, it's very easy in birth to get overwhelmed by the mystery of it, the intensity of it, and the fact that you're not in control. But when you prepare in the way that I prepare women, and I know there are a lot of other good courses out there, things like hypnobirthing, calm birth, where they work with the mind, then once you get those superpowers online and that deep understanding and partners on board, then whatever comes your way, you're so much better equipped to be able to deal with it, to manage it, and to overcome it. because you're really bringing online what you have to offer the
Yeah.
situation. So thank you. Thank you so much for sharing so generously your
Pleasure.
beautiful, wonderful story, because there's lots of great teaching points in there for people listening. And whilst we can't control birth, we can influence it. So these
Yeah.
stories help us to understand how. So thanks for tuning in, and we'll bring you some more goodness again next week. We hope you enjoyed this episode. Please subscribe and share this podcast. This episode has been brought to you by Transform Parenting, an organisation that provides courses, coaching and community from pregnancy through to the first 7 years of a child's life. It is a place where you can learn, get support and grow into your role as a parent. Why not take advantage of a special gift for all pregnant women at transformyourbirth.com.au. Or if you have children, we have a gift for parents also.